Hey, it's Saturday after Thanksgiving, and I'm finally catching up on some work. And I wanted to respond to the postmodernism discussion board. I've graded the poetry one, and you see your scores. And if you have any questions, just email me. Since we're kind of past that, you're not really responsible for that material on the final or on your final paper. I thought I would just address the postmodernism, the three stories. She names them. A good man is hard to find, and as I stand here ironing. I just wanted to comment on a few things. You all get the idea of what black humor is, and many of you did not like the black humor in A Good Man is Hard to Find, and that is certainly okay. But just some corrections. If you're going to use biographical criticism, meaning you're going to draw on the life of the writer, it's okay to do that because I'm sure writers' lives impact what they choose to write about. But make sure you investigate a little bit more deeply. I mean, it's true that Flannery O'Connor died of lupus at a young age, but she was always concerned about issues of salvation and redemption, whether it was possible in the modern world, and things that disturbed her about the modern world. But she was pretty religious, but all of her writing is just full of these grotesque, awful characters that probably cause us to question um, our existence and whether or not salvation is possible and like what's wrong with us. But in this story, one thing I think you all failed to mention. Sure, a good man was hard to find. None of the men were good, the misfit, Bailey boy, whatever. But the grandmother wasn't a good person. She was a hypocrite and a manipulator. And I too, like Cynthia or Cindy, found her humorous. Her tactics and her little schemes, sneaking the cat along and all that. But she wasn't a good person. And really, a lot of people read the end of that story as when she reaches out to the misfit and says, "Why, you're one of my own babies." That's when she finally says, "You know what? We're all alike. I'm no better than anybody. It doesn't matter if I'm wearing the nice underwear and I'm found dead on the side of the road," which ironically was exactly what happened. But when she makes that connection, that's what causes her to get shot, but it's also probably her salvation at the end because that was the only non hypocritical, sort of judgmental kind of moment of her life. And one thing that y'all didn't mention about the black humor, when the misfit says she'd have been a good woman if there had been someone there to shoot her every minute of her life, uh, yeah, I think that was probably one of the dark humor moments. So I just wanted to comment on that. On She Names Them, I think Mary Hutchins kind of got at the idea of what was in that story maybe better than anyone else. Names are very important, the labels we put on each other, and how we form our identities. And Susie Adams had mentioned that, that's why we're meant to have names. Well, that's a man made construct or a human made construct, naming and categorizing. And so part of the point of that story was that was a way for Adam to control her, the unnamed one. It was a way for, if you're the one who names these things and puts them in the order that you think they belong in, you have a sense of control over them, so to speak. And so by taking that away, while some of you noted the chaos or the lack of identity that may ensue, it could also empower formerly sort of oppressed beings. It's another way to look at that, and that's part of what's going on in that story. It's clearly something with sexual politics going on there with the relationship of the man and the woman, presumably Adam and Eve. But some of you cracked me up because you said, animals are like us and that they strive and want identity. And it's like, no, we're like that. And even your Yorkie, Kathy, I know my dog kind of cocks his head like he knows what I'm saying sometimes too. But we have to remember that these animals are supposed to be sort of like stereotypes of different kinds of people, but people and animals, you know, aren't really the same in that way. We tend to anthropomorphize or like put our human qualities on our pets and our animals because we love them. And, I do the same thing. But in that discussion board, if you go back and look, some of you are saying, animals and people are just alike. No, not really. And that was part of the humor. And, postmodernism strips assumptions and takes assumptions that we hold and breaks them down and says, no, maybe those aren't really true. And so the naming, the thing about how names are important and our identity is attached to our names, etc., that assumption is taken and broken down. Also, that is an example of a parody. She Unnames Them takes the popular, well-known story of Genesis and parodies, makes a funny version of it. Parody is one of those ways that postmodernists take more classic literature and use it for their own, meanings, purposes, methods, or whatever. Last thing, I Stand Here Ironing. That story was, there's no humor in that. One of you, and I'm not going to say your name, but one of you talked about you saw the humor in it. That one doesn't use black humor at all. But that story, I just want to say, you want to remember about single moms. In the United States today, we have social programs, we have WIC, welfare, we have different kinds of programs that help people Head Start for education and things like that. During the time that this story is set, there are none of those services available. None of those services available. So if a woman is married and her only source of income is her husband and he up and leaves her, she's got nothing. She's not going to get unemployment for a couple of weeks. She's not going to get welfare. She hopefully has family to help take care of the child, but if she doesn't, they're stuck. So that was much more dire circumstances in that story than what we might envision a single mom today. That's hard enough today. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. So pretty good job on that discussion board. That's the last discussion board of the semester, but you can review this discussion board. It might help prepare you for final exam or Twiz 3. Enjoy the rest of this weekend. I'll see you later.